chronically numb in a way, not all, but a vast majority. So without being finger pointing, saying that, you know, vast majority of us were in a comfortable oblivion to just surviving every day. And then this came along and swung our whole world off its axis. And we've all been in coping mechanisms, you know, just trying to, and we have the highs and the lows and I always say swings and roundabouts, and then not actually mourning that life that was, because it's never going to be back the way it was. It doesn't matter where you are. And so I just thought about how would we hold space for somebody to say, this is what the mourning process would be like. How do we hold that for them?
Well, it's acknowledging, I would say personally would be to acknowledge your feelings, because it's really about tuning in with how you're feeling right now, you know, personally. And I've been resisting actually really connecting to what it is that I'm feeling right now. I connect to the feeling and how does it feel in the body? Connect to the sensation, the physical sensation in the body. And I know for me, it's been mainly in the belly. I've been like feeling the anxiety in the belly, and the anger in the belly. Everything's been happening for me in the belly, which is the womb. It's interesting because it's the womb, and it's also where, you know, their survival kind of is, like the life force energy is sitting there, you know. So for me personally, it's really about, you know, acknowledging the feeling and going deep within that truth, you know, facing your truth, how you're feeling right now. And people are resisting that. They don't want to confront themselves to these deeply seated emotions or feelings. And that's why people, I feel, resist change, because they're not willing to face the truth. They just rather run away from it. But I think now we're being confronted to face, you know, how we truly feel. And let's do something about it. You know, it's enough now, just like suppressing, because that's the conditioning of suppressing, right? That's been going on for decades and decades, suppressing what we're feeling. So personally, for me, it would be to acknowledge those feelings that are rising up in each moment.
Yeah, I think also, because for me, another aspect is that, you know, often you have some kind of a feeling, and you kind of in this distress of like, oh, what am I going to do, and how's this going to work out, and what happened to that, and having all these mixed emotions. And then the next thing that comes in, which is such a pre-programmed thing about diminishing your own feelings, and that is, oh, you know, you're lucky actually, in comparison to that person or that person, you actually getting off quite well. So don't complain, just be grateful for what you have. So that's where you're actually not able to really bring that emotion to the foreground and go, this is my truth. This is how I'm really feeling. I'm anxious, and I'm having moments of depression where I can't get out of bed, and I'm feeling disjointed. And it's not like, yes, but shut up, because you actually better off than most. And I think most of us, and that's also where a large part of suppression is coming. Like I feel it a lot in South Africa. It's like, oh yeah, but at least you're not on the street corner begging.
No, I feel it too here in France. Believe me, I feel it here as well in France, and with my family dynamic around me, you know, I can feel these suppressing emotions big time, or projections, a lot of projections of all these negative feelings that they're not willing to confront and face. And it's like, but it's okay to be vulnerable, you know. So it's really owning our human vulnerability, you know. It's really owning that vulnerability and not avoiding it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
Kimberley.
Any thought?
I'm listening. So it's really interesting what both of you were saying in response to loss. One, I think womb consciousness is really growing in the collective, because when it comes to this idea of suppression, what we're really suppressing is our creative power. Yes. And that's what sits in our sacral. And so I think like you'll find if you speak to anybody who's kind of engaged in their body or any kind of work at this point, a lot of people are having problems with their sacral. And I think particularly in South Africa, because of the way that the society has been constructed, I think a lot of people are having problems with that, because there's so much cultural diversity that everybody tries to lock into, like, you know, like maybe like the unifying language of English is business language. That it really limits the way in which we can express, exchange, and engage with each other, because you're putting on a suit, right, in order to be able to communicate. And when you look at that, that might be what's going on, but I'm not 100% sure. Secondly to that, that I am aware that it's arisen like half a dozen times in my conversations in the last 2 weeks about womb wisdom and womb pain and all that kind of stuff. So it's very indicative of rebirthing and being reborn and creative power and what's next and what do we want to create. And then the other thing is about mourning the loss. So I work as what I call a life doula, which is in essence a trauma doula. So I'm a rebirth doula. What's been coming up within that work is that initially when we went into lockdown, lots of people were like in trauma because we didn't know what was going to happen. Going to have to stay in the house, like the immediate, are we all going to die? How bad is it going to be? Do I have to wear a mask outside? All that paranoia and the fever pitch, and when it's like a global fever pitch sort of tension that was there in the ether. And then everybody kind of settled into it. And it was like, oh, being at home's not that bad. But at the same time, like all these things started to emerge that people weren't used to, because they could just go to the pub or they could go for a run in the park, or all these high functioning trauma coping mechanisms. When it's like, whoa, what's it like to just sit down and be still with your emotions? And what's it like to actually live with your partner and not be like dodging each other on the way to work and all those kinds of things. And also like deeper relationships with parents and family or friends or the people that we live with. But now, since we've kind of begun to come out of lockdown, what I am sensing is the realization that it's not ever going to go back the same. So everybody had that, right, I've just got to cope with being here right now. But when we get out of lockdown, then this is going to happen. When I'm able to go back to university, go back to work, then this is going to happen. And now people are realizing, either through their own inner journey or through the world as it stands at the moment, that it's not going to go back to normal. Yeah. And so now there's a complete readjust of, it isn't the same, and it's not going to be the same, and I'm not the same. And if it's not going to be the same, and it's not the same, and I'm not the same, then what does it mean? And it is a grief and loss process of people now having to reforge a different way, and yet not knowing what that different way is.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that was for me the exciting thing of, if we can kind of help support the process of this grief and this mourning and this letting go of, the other side of that is opportunity, inspiration, new exciting ideas. It's like the opposite of it. But when you're stuck in this thing, like you say, Kimberley, not having ways to escape it, because you're having to deal all the time. And if somebody's never done any kind of work on themselves before, and they're having to really focus on this thing, it's like, it's too much, you know, and there's no escape. So there was a beautiful little thing that came out that I posted at one stage, and it was, if you can't go out, go within.
Yes.
But there was so much fear around going within. It's like, like, oh, okay, that's enough. And so I think it's, you know, what I watched in the beginning of lockdown was people really reaching out and having WhatsApp groups and having contact, because they needed that. And then as things progressed, and it in survival mode, like all the WhatsApp groups that I was attached to, and I'm talking family groups and friend groups and stuff, there's barely like action on it. There's barely any movement on it, because people are just in coping. And I'm witnessing it in a close proximity to somebody that I'm staying with on the masculine, where it's like this, and then it's poof, and then it's like this, and then poof. And I keep like trying to balance the scales and level out. And it's like he doesn't have the tools to be able to do that. So I think it's trying to find tools to go, okay, are you breathing? Are you doing a certain amount of breathing every day? And just really being present with your body and what's coming up for you. And whatever that is, being true to it. Allow it to come out, and don't judge yourself and beat yourself for feeling like that or compare yourself. You know, the gratitude is definitely important, but allow how you feel, and that's okay.
That's funny what you described, because that's exactly what I've created actually during this whole process. I created this 9-step program to find inner peace, and I'm guiding people through this supportive process, through all these emotions, all these feelings, to allow, and then sharing all my tools that I've been using myself here, because I've been really going through all these emotions like depression, loneliness, or loneliness, like, I mean, feeling alone, and then the opposite, because I've done the work, because going through the inner work, facing the truth, facing my feelings, and going deep within myself, like that's like the deepest I've ever been, I think, into introspection, you know, like, but that's the only way. And also going deep into the forgiveness process, because that's important as well, to forgive myself, also to feel this way. And that's been part of my healing. The forgiveness process has been part of my healing.
Beautiful.
Yeah, for me, it's like, especially what you said about the masculine, because the thing is as well, especially in relation to the masculine, but it could be applied to anybody, is the adrenal addiction that normal day-to-day life requires for you to be functional in society. And most people are there and they don't even realize it. So it's like, if you're in the drama, and especially for men, because there's a threat, right? And they want to go out and fight the threat, but the threat is in the air and there's nothing to fight. You got to stay home. And so it's like, if you can imagine, got to protect the family, got to do these things, and then it's like, but you know, so beyond like staying at home and like bordering up your windows or whatever it is that you're going to do, they don't know what to do with those feelings as well, and how to articulate those feelings, and if they're pre-verbal, and what is that? Because a lot of people don't know that adrenaline is adrenaline. They actually think it's a genuine, real fight or flight response. And that's what you're seeing, I think, with the mask thing about like, oh, but we're trying to be controlled. And so they're projecting that trauma of the fear onto and I wouldn't necessarily say that it's an imaginary threat, but it isn't an immediate threat. You know what I mean? It's like, and so it's like there has to be something to fight, so we'll fight the system. But I mean, it's like, it's a really interesting way in which you can see that brain and neuroplasticity working in order to gain control. Because if they can just gain control, then they're going to feel safe. And if they can just feel safe, then everything will go back to normal. But it isn't. It's deeper than that, because it's looking at how your neuroplasticity is impacting your choices and your primitive brain in the way that you respond.
Yeah. Because it's not tactile. It's not something that you can grab a hold of and actually make like you say, for the masculine, it's like, okay, let's go to war. And it's like, well, what are we fighting? Like, there's kind of nothing there. And it's trying to process that. So Kimberley, I think you hit that so beautifully on the head. And now that you say it, it's like, suddenly there's so many coins dropping for me on like, oh yes, that's what these guys are struggling with, because you know, they're finding other things they need to be in the physicality in other ways. Like one's being like kite surfing, and another one's like doing gymming, and they're doing physical things because it's their process work. I think women are more, you know, they tend to go more into the heart. They're more in their emotions and their feelings, like, you know, which drives men a bit crazy, and men are not like that. So they really, and I think in another way, it's exciting because like this could tip the scales for the masculinity, like, woohoo, welcome aboard, welcome to our world, emotions, feelings, woo, the heart.
Well, guess what, Kim? Guess what? You know, I told you through my healing process, I manifested love, right? During this COVID.
Yes.
And I manifested that divine masculine that is so within his heart. He's pure, this man is pure love, and he's really in touch with his feeling, and he's not allowing the outer world to affect him in any way. And I've never seen or met or encountered anyone like this before. So for me to witness this and have a relationship with a man who is pure love and not allowing any other, you know, external emotions to affect him, or whatever's happening in this outer world reality affect him, is like, wow, this is true power. This is owning your true power as a human being, you know. And he's embracing the divine feminine and embracing the divine masculine. I mean, this is the balance, right? I mean, and to experience this is just mind blowing, because actually he's the one bringing me the balance that I felt I didn't have within myself.
Yeah.
I was thrown off balance by all these outer reality, and I kept going and I kept externalizing all my emotions, externalizing everything. Every time I would not want to face my inner feelings and, you know, and really feel what's happening within me, I would externalize it or connect with people outside in my outer world, instead of internalizing and going really like facing this. And then so it was a great balance to and a great guide for me as well, to like to bring me back into that inner power, that inner truth, you know. And of course in Miracles, obviously, that we're doing together is also helping this process.
Okay. Well, an interesting idea would be maybe one day to have him as a kind of a guest in terms of the masculinity, and actually have some questions. So you as a man, how are you feeling with this and this and this? And how would you suggest a process? Because, you know, men are always going to buck. Like, I have these conversations here around the dinner table, and I say, and they're like, yeah, I hear you. I get what you're saying, you know. And it's like a light bulb moment, but then it's moved so quickly past, because it's not part of their being and their everyday practice. So there's a light bulb, and then the light goes out. So then I have to bring it back in. So to have a masculine energy within one of our Zoom meetings, to say, yeah, I felt this or whatever, it really brings it home to men that it's like, oh, so we can feel, we can do this. Exactly. There's a man doing it.
Well, that's why me and him plan to have this TV. Well, it's coming. I know it's coming soon, but when we meet, you know, because he's over there in South Africa and I'm here, obviously, in France. But we have a plan to share all these wisdom and share our story and our process, because it's been beyond words. Actually, you have to feel it, like be present with this. It's like there's no words. Actually, it's the way we connected is on such a like a soul level that it's beyond words, right? There's no words when you connect at a soul level or spiritual level. It's beyond the body. It's beyond the body. So
that's also something that's been coming up in COVID, is the fact that we can communicate out with the normal situations. If we really tune in, we can energetically communicate very, very well with people. And that's very much something that's coming into the collective consciousness as well, reading energy. Even though it's been very hippie and Reiki and whatever, but I think people are beginning to realize they're far more sensitive to what's going on in the world and to people over the last few months, and to just energetics than they've ever really encountered before.
I have to say though that the one thing I'm really feeling is people are the energy is almost electric. So frequencies are like kind of doing a lot of this, and it's not a steady thing. So you'll find sometimes on Facebook or something, friends, people that know each other, that kind of have spent time together, will suddenly be triggered by one another's statements or a share that they've made, and then they'll make a blanket statement, and the other person is like, don't you dare do that on my page. And then it's like, well, unfriend. And there's a lot of that knee-jerk thing. And I spoke to somebody this morning, and he said somebody had just unfriended him on something. And I said to him, you know, you can choose to just lay down with that, or rather off the page, send them a message, say, hey, this is how it made me feel, and I didn't mean to, upset, and rather let that energy just thing, because it's so prickly at the moment, and people are really knee-jerking with emotion because they're not having an output for it. Like you're saying, like gym, or yes, you can exercise and you can do a thing, but it's not that frequency of like, oh, I'm going to go and see my friends and load some of my stuff. You take your boat that's heavily laden with all this stuff that's been packed on, and you're like, okay, that's got to go off, and this goes here, and you have that with friends, or around a braai or a barbecue, or whatever it looks like. And now with not having that, it's all this like, what do I do with this? What do I do with this? And it's, it's really triggering each other. So we have to almost take a step when you just, and then before you react, go like, wow, why is this triggering me? And I think anybody, like, for example, I'll take us three, we've all done a fair amount of work to be able to clock that. And yet we still have our days where we like, don't want to get out of bed, hit the wall.
Well, I get so triggered by my parents too. Yeah. I still get triggered. I mean,
parents are the biggest teachers, man.
Yeah. Big trigger.
Red flag, bull.
Yeah, and I'm practicing, the responding, but it's challenging at times. Yeah. If I don't meditate or go within myself or not connect to spirit or source, forget it. I lose it, and absolutely. I react in the wrong way.
Yeah.
But that's the ego. That's because I'm allowing the ego to respond or to react instead of the Holy Spirit, instead of source. That's why it's so important right now to connect to source, to the divine within ourselves, to our higher self, because then we can respond appropriately to whatever life, the outer life or the outer world throw at us, right? But if we don't connect to source, it's going to be the ego, like you said, Kim, that's going to react. And then it's going to be finger pointing, blaming, shaming, judging, criticizing. Oh yeah, we get a whole lot. Time on social media. I mean, that's why I know that I'm choosing what I'm focusing on. But if I allow myself to be distracted by external posts, but for example on social media, I know that I'm very aware of the discussions of people, and I can see where they are at in life just by what they're sharing, by the language they use, by the awareness that they share. So it's easy, but that's why it's always important to go back to source, because that's where the wisdom is, and the holiness is, and the divinity within ourselves.
But it's also really important to learn that good relationships of any kind are based on respect.
To what, sorry?
The good relationships or communication of any kind are based on respect. And just because you do not agree with somebody or what they have to say, you have no right to invalidate what they have to say.
That's true. Thank you.
Because that's disrespectful.
Yes.
And I have no right to try and change your mind, or to convince you to feel differently, or to dismiss your feelings, or to think your logic is flawed. And I think, like, when we get really down to it, that's what's going on, and that's why our trauma levels are so high in society as a whole. Is because we're told that we are meant to do this, and this, and we know that the way that we live our lives is highly disruptive, not necessarily immediately to us, but it's based on somebody else's exploitation. And if not somebody else's exploitation, it's a desecration of nature and the planet. And we can compartmentalize that because it's not immediate, right? And we can do all that disrespectful behavior because it doesn't impact us, because we have privilege, right? But when you take that back to something like a Facebook page, which still isn't inherently harmful, right? Like, when we see somebody going, yeah, I eat McDonald's all day, every day, or whatever it is, could be anything at this point in time, right? Like, if we're then going, why do you eat McDonald's and why do you do that? Don't you know what they're doing to the planet, doing to the Amazon, and why would you do that to your body? And but it's like, but that's not my choice. That's not my place to tell somebody.
Yes.
If they ask for that information, yeah, because they've been intrigued by your Facebook posts or by what you have said in a different conversation, then fine, they're inviting that conversation. But especially at this point, I don't think it's helping anybody to condemn and shame and nail and frame, because we're all really vulnerable. And actually, if we behave like we're all really vulnerable to begin with, and we all have these sort of trauma shadows that we carry with us, we really wouldn't be so happy to like pull these Facebook trigger gun happy sort of posts of like, because that's just you discharging your feeling for 2 seconds in order to make it more comfortable for you. Because if I just tell them what to do and they believe me, because that works, doesn't it? If I just tell somebody exactly what they should be doing with their life and how they should be feeling and thinking and approaching things, then that's going to make it all better, because that works, doesn't it, in the world at large?
Well, yeah. But here's a nice, like a really interesting play on what you just said. If you think about it, when somebody is like being triggered or poking at a post or somebody else's share, what they're doing is they're creating a conflict drama, something over here. Because if it's over here, I don't have to be over here.
Exactly.
So sometimes it's that distraction by going, and then they get into a thing. It's like, okay, but so why are you feeling the need to say that? Well, did you read that post? Yes. No, it's not about the post. Why would you feel like you needed to be so confrontational? What were you going to gain from it? You're entitled to your opinion for sure, but that's a post from somebody else and it's neither here nor there. And sometimes, well, not sometimes, mostly people are posting or statements in that, and it's from either fear or ego. Those are the two places that it's coming from. And if you can identify.
But fear is part of the ego.
Well, it is, but fear is, like with ego, it's a sense of wanting, for me, a sense of wanting to be right, so that your world is in balance. You put a blanket statement on something and it's like, well, it is that, and you need it to be that so that the world is at peace. And for me, fear is the fear of this unknown, like, where are we, how are we? And it's, there's no stable kind of guidelines, and everything's turnabout face. So people are reeling and trying to find that. So when, like you say, the vulnerability would be beautiful if we could just have that vulnerability, and I find people fear it as well, especially with strong people. Like sometimes I'll say to somebody, if it's my strong sisters like you two, it's manageable. But if it's anybody else, they kind of have this wide-eyed, like, no, not you as well. I don't want to hear anymore. Like, if you break, then that's it, kind of thing. So there's an expectation of certain people trying to hold that together, because that shows them that they can also do it. And if you break, it's like, what? So it's super interesting to observe all these things going on the whole time,
Very fascinating world we live in, isn't it?
Yeah. But what I would say, though, going back to those Facebook posts, that's probably an adrenaline response. So when you're in fight, flight, or fear, you produce adrenaline. And so if you're like the drama thing, so if you're not dealing with your stuff and you've got this adrenaline rush, which is different from your limbic system, and you're trying to discharge it, it's like, I'll just go, I don't like your post. And then it's like, and then it's like, yeah, drama. Oh. And then you get all your adrenaline rush and you get your fix. And then you're like, yeah, and you're out of your, you're out of that like contracted fear into the explosive fear of release, right? And you did this, and and everybody's like going around like glorious and like vitriol with their righteous indignation of what's going on. And so that's a really big part of what I think we're seeing as well. I mean, I can't say for sure. I'm not a medical doctor. I haven't got like a degree in neuroscience or even like hormones or physiology, but like having watched it a few times, I'm like, that's what's going on. But yes, vulnerability is the key. But unless we have safe spaces in which to be vulnerable, it makes it incredibly hard, because otherwise they're just re-traumatizing ourselves.
But that's why, you know, I personally feel that these authentic relating circles are so important. I used to do like this authentic relating expression sessions where we truly share how we felt in the moment, and that was so powerful. Like, oh my gosh, like the haha moment and the breakthrough that came up in this process was so powerful. But yeah, it has to be a very well held space where people feel safe enough to share that vulnerability, like you said before. But yeah, this is so powerful, and I think it's needed for whoever is ready for this.
Yeah. Well, that was the idea behind getting this group together, because I think all of us in our own right have been doing this kind of work and supporting people, and we're all kind of quite intuitive into it, and we also operate very much from our truth. So we allow ourselves the vulnerabilities, we allow ourselves the breakdowns and the fall to the floor.
The pressure moment.
And then crawling back up. How are you?
Or hanging by the pinkies, my one.
So yeah, that was amazing for our first conversation session.
Yeah, I think we covered a lot of ground today.
Yeah, we did. So
and we had a good giggle. Laughter's great.
Let's end up with the laughter. Very good. Very good.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, guys, stay tuned to the next conversation. We love you, and watch the replay if you missed it. Stay tuned and keep.
Love you, beautiful ladies. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Love you.
Bye. Love you.
Bye.
Thank you.